All right, so let's talk about for loops for a minute here. For loops are probably, to me, they're one of the most powerful tools in your toolbox. I used for loops for all kinds of things in my script and stuff over the years. The beauty part about for loops is it allows you to take your program and if you have a repetitive task, do that task, and it does it at machine code speed very, very quickly. So let's play with some for loops. So in this case, we're going to define this I here as 1. So if we take I and we make that variable into 1 and we'll put it in a for loop. So for I is less than or equal to 3. And now we want to put in our curly brackets, fmt dot print line. Now you'll notice here, this is a bug. It should be popping up that this is a, there it finally goes, that this was a function I was calling the FMT package. But you notice there it wasn't doing that at first. I've had this problem before where the code is coded right, but because the IDE is not picking it up, it messes up. It's really quite annoying. Anyway, so now we're going to say I equals I plus 1. So let's save this. What do you think is going to happen here? We're saying in this for loop, and this is probably the most basic for loop that you can build here. Actually, it even says it right here. It's the most basic type. But you're basically saying for I, which is 1, we want to, if I is less than or equal to 3, we want you to do this task and add 1 to it. So when we run this, it's going to go 1, 2, 3. Likewise, if we change this to 9, for example, we're basically saying, hey, count to 9. And it does. So it allows us to go through and do these repetitive tasks very quickly. So what's some good examples of repetitive tasks? Well, let's say you've got, one of the things I've used it for a lot is I want you to go through each line in the CSV file and do this. So I would actually, if I need to run a particular script on a bunch of computers, I could actually query Active Directory. I did this with PowerShell a lot. Put it in a for loop. So for every computer account in this OU, I want you to go out and run this script against that computer. Or you could use it against a CSV file. Here's a list of computers, and I want you to run this script on this list of computers. Or maybe you want to have it go through each line in a document and then add that line into another document, or change the output and add these things. There's a lot of different things that you can use for loops for. Like in programming, you might want to use a for loop to keep a service going, listening for active connections, things like that. So for loops are very, very powerful. All right, let's play with this a little bit more. So let's go ahead, let's back this down to 3. Let's stick with our go by example output. And now we're going to say for j, and we're going to put the variable actually inside the for loop. So up here we put the variable before the for loop, right? Remember this colon equals, this is a shortened form of, hey, we're defining a variable. Well, we can define this right inside the for loop. We don't have to do it prior. And we're going to say 7 here. And then we put a semicolon in and say j is less than or equal to 9. Just by this code alone, you're probably already knowing based off of what we played with up here and also looking down at the code down here, you know what the result's going to be, right? We're basically saying we want you to start at 7 and count to 9. But notice we've got this j++ now. That's different than what we had up here. Well, it's 2 ways of doing the exact same thing. Essentially what we're saying is, okay, j is 7. J is less than or equal to 9. We want you to add 1 to it. That's what this ++ means. And we want you to put the output of that in our console. So now let's save this. And when we run this, there we go. 1, 2, 3. Actually, we're getting a different expectation here. Did I not save it? Undefined. Oh, ha 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 ha. I see what I did there. We made a boo-boo. We did an uppercase J instead of a lowercase. And what didn't save because this was still showing it as 9. So let's clear our console up here and let's run this again. There we go. So now we got our 1, 2, 3 from our first for loop and 7, 8, 9 from our second for loop. And we can actually clean this code up some. So for example, we can put in, like up here, we can use the format package, right? Use the print line module out of that package. And we could say, this is our first for loop. Now let's take this same bit of code. And this is the nice part when you're learning. We get to change some stuff up and make it a little unique. I don't know, by doing this, to me, it helps me remember stuff like this better. And then we can put, this is our second for loop. So now that we did that, there we go. Now we're having it a little more defined, so we can say, oh, this was our first for loop, this is our second, makes it a little more readable. And we're taking what we've already learned and we're adding it into the code that we're doing now. Okay, so next thing, you can do a for loop, very, very simple, without any type of arguments. You know, whereas here we're just saying, hey, we want you to start at this number, count up to that number, blah, blah, blah. Well, now what we're doing is we're just saying, I want you to print this line. So here they're just saying loop. We're going to say endless loop. And in here, we're going to add a break statement. Because if we don't add this break statement, it will do this many, many, many times over. So let's clear our console again. Let's run it. And there's our endless loop. If we left this break out, watch what happens. It's just endlessly putting that endless loop. And I had to do a Control-C to make it stop. That really, really clogged up our logs because it's doing it so quickly. So you want to remember those breaks in order to stop it. Now we could even take this and like say that we only want this to run like 5 times, right? Or whatever. But in this case, we're just saying we want you to run once and then stop. This is just a fancy way of just showing you can make endless loops and you need to be careful and conscious of that. All right, so let's do our last one. 4, and this time we're doing in, and we're defining in as 0. And this time, unlike our other examples, we're going to say in is less than or equal to 5. And we're going to do an n plus plus. And we're going to say if the value of n equals 0, we want you to continue and format print line and then in there. Okay, so let's run this and let's clear console up again, run our for loop. Now you'll notice what it's doing here is this in %2. We're basically saying, okay, we want you to start at 0, but we want you to skip it and skip any positive numbers. So it's only printing the not negative number, odd numbers. We don't want you to print the even numbers, I should say, not positive numbers. And that's why we're getting this 1, 3, and 5 instead. So just some fun stuff. You can be very creative when it comes to your for loops, but this gives you a couple different examples of how you can leverage for loops in some very, very basic ways. And later on, we're going to have some more fun with for loops as we go, and see what else we can do with them when we start building our base packages and our first actual programs. All right, let's move on to if else.